He's back into it in Chester. Here's El Senior. Yes! Yes! The center back, Jacob Glesnes, is going for it. Oh my God! What a goal! And that will do it! One of the best comebacks in recent years. 3 unanswered by the Union. And they go into the Gold Cup break, winning it 3-2.
Hello and welcome to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd. And week 8 of MLS is upon us as we see the Union head down south to take on Nashville SC to open up Nashville's brand new stadium, Geodis Park. We talked last episode about May being a tough schedule for the Union, an absolutely brutal month as the Union are away 5 out of their 7 games. We know the Union typically, can get a draw here and there on the road. Like we saw last year, I believe they had something like 8. But, so far so good. The Union on the road, 1 win, 1 draw against New York City. And they lost, as we all know, against Toronto. Also had that win in Montreal, so my bad, 2 wins. But joining me to talk about Nashville's brand new stadium, a team that's played all the games so far on the road. So I guess us Union fans complaining about 5 games on the road is nothing to these guys. But he covers Nashville SC for the Tennessean. He is Mr. Drake Hills. Drake, how you doing?
Yeah, Todd, thanks for having me on. It's a busy week. I'll leave it at that. I'll save you and spare you the details. But I'm looking forward to not only experiencing what the game will feel like, but I'm definitely looking forward to May 2nd, the morning after, when it's all over and I can breathe a little bit.
For sure, yeah, 30,000 fans, something like that. I mean, I know there's a good amount of Union fans going down there. Obviously, we all know MLS has to allocate a certain amount to away fans, but no matter how many Union fans go down there, I'm sorry, Union fans, you're not going to hear from those guys. A brand new stadium, 30,000, the biggest soccer-specific stadium in North America. I mean, I'm a little bit jealous I'm not going down to this game, but it's going to be a blast watching it on ESPN this Sunday. And my question to you, I'm sure you probably have, but have you got a chance to tour around the whole stadium yet? I know I saw on your Instagram you posted a picture when they unrevealed the stadium name, but have you been around the whole stadium?
I have, and I have been blessed to be able to tour it at separate stages, over the course of the past, I want to say 15 months. And I remember in that late January, early February 2021, where it was literally just a bunch of steel beams sticking out of the dirt. And the supporters section was basically slabs of concrete, looked like large steps going up to the top. And here we are. I've been able to see everything from the press box to the tunnel to the field, from where the locker room is to the concourses to the main entrances to where the players are going to park to the press room, and the field itself is amazing. And I got a chance to look at the premium seating. I think everything about this stadium is going to not only introduce MLS to what Nashville is, but also show Nashville what soccer is truly about and what Nashville SC has done over the past couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to this. Not only just this game, but to see how Nashville fans just take in this brand new stadium. I mean, seeing pictures, I'm sure seeing pictures online and being there in person does the stadium no justice. And those pictures are wonderful. And like you said, you've been there for different stages and everything, and to finally see this stadium complete, playing a game, I mean, time's flying by for Nashville fans to finally be home in a stadium where, they don't have to share it with the Titans, where they have their soccer-specific stadium. But before we get into all things Nashville, I think, I was aware of you when you had a podcast called Plugged In, a Nashville soccer podcast, I believe it was. And then after that, I would see all the time appear with Andrew Wiebe and the guys over at MLSsoccer.com on their Twitter spaces whenever they needed somebody to talk about Nashville. And I believe you've been covering Nashville SC since 2019. I might be a little bit off when they were still playing. Okay, good. When they were playing in the USL. So how did you find yourself covering soccer and specifically Nashville?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to make a quick Union plug. I'm sure way back in, I want to say 2017, Union fans will remember a youngster who was really a man-child. His name was Derek Jones. And so I want to make a quick shout out to Derek. I got a chance to get to know him when he came to Nashville as an MLS player, but was loaned to the USL outfit before making the inaugural MLS roster. But yeah, back to your question. I've been a lifelong soccer fan. I played soccer growing up in San Diego, where I grew up, and I followed it even through college. I went to the University of Oregon, go Ducks. And once I got to grad school at Northwestern in Chicago, I started to cover the Fire and Chicago Red Stars, and even some local soccer going on in the Windy City. And from there, I just made sure that I was freelancing whenever I could. I've done the SB Nation sites for Bayern Munich. I've done Pro Soccer USA, which is obviously was tied to the Orlando Sentinel at that time. I freelanced for the Cincinnati Enquirer when FC Cincinnati expanded into the league in 2019. And that landed me a spot covering Phoenix Rising in 2019, which that was a big year for that city, because that really started the snowball effect of trying to get a bid to expand in MLS when they broke the American soccer record for a winning streak. They got a lot of cool points for hosting dollar beer nights and cohesion and correspondence with Bud Light. So I was able to jump on that beat and went from that beat straight to Nashville. So I've been blessed to be able to cover soccer, I would say, for the past 4 years. And that's truly been awesome, given really the tough and the small window of opportunity for soccer media to cover the sport full time, especially at the top tier in MLS.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about Derek Jones. David Accam was with Nashville, and same with Taylor Washington, who I believe is still with the club. And so two more former Philadelphia Union players. And yeah, we obviously won't see David Accam or Derek Jones as they're no longer with the club. But Taylor Washington, there's a chance for Union fans that remember the name. But moving on, Nashville SC, like we mentioned, they've been on the road all season long, and they took on LA Galaxy this past weekend, where the Galaxy ended up winning that game 1-0 with a late goal from Dejan Joveljic. This is a game that Nashville had to, absorb a ton of pressure in this game. And, I guess it makes sense because, not all teams have the attacking talent that LA Galaxy has. And, there's a reason why Nashville didn't see a lot of the balls, because of the talent that LA Galaxy were able to push forward against Nashville. And, I guess the one thing that's surprising for me is typically Nashville, they get a lot of opportunities on the counterattack, but they only had 4 shots in this game, and they were caught off sides 5 times, which, it's a huge credit to the way that LA defended. They were very well organized, played a good offsides trap. Again, like I said, just a major credit for the way that they defended against Nashville. But what were your takeaways from last week's game against LA Galaxy?
Yeah, I'll start maybe in reverse order, starting with the high line that the Galaxy was playing. I think we all know historically the Galaxy over the past couple of years has struggled. Obviously, before Greg Vanney took charge, struggling at the back line, and I think Greg has been slowly but surely rebuilding that back line. And they didn't have Jorge Villafaña; he was out, and so it was quite interesting to see how the Galaxy was still confident playing at home to play that back line. As to your point, Randall Leal, Hani Mukhtar were caught off sides, I think 2 times each. CJ was caught off sides, I believe, once. So that was that. I wasn't really concerned watching the game because I watching Nashville see enough. And if you go back to the way Nashville played against Seattle, first game of the season in Seattle, I think it was a similar situation of Seattle was very comfortable with how they were defending at home, and they weren't too concerned with what was going on in the wings. They really clogged up the middle, and Nashville did the same. But what was different about LA, it seemed like they were able to keep Nashville from having much of an effect playing direct. And a lot of times I would see, Nashville was just playing the ball out of the back, sideways, left to right, right to left. And I think that it was a struggle not to see Nashville score. I believe their best chance was Randall Leal. Maybe 10 minutes before halftime, he got a shot that was pretty, I want to say around 15 to 20 yards out. And, Bond made a good save. So from there, it was definitely a concern watching Nashville. You can tell they were out of gas. There wasn't really much of a pressure. I don't think that they didn't have as much quality on the ball that we've seen in previous matches. Columbus being one of them. Against Kansas City in the second half, particularly at the beginning of the second half. So yeah, I definitely, if I'm Nashville, you would love to be able to keep that point going on the road and ending the road trip. But still, I mean, if you zoom out, and 11 points in the first 8 games, it's pretty decent. And a stat that was pushed throughout the press corps going up into the Galaxy game was 1.57 road points per match on average over the first 7 games, which was best in MLS history in terms of road form. So taking a look at that, I am definitely pleased if I'm Gary Smith, but turning it full circle here, what a great matchup for the home opener as a team that obviously what happened in the playoffs in the Eastern Conference semis last year up in Chester. This is a great matchup.
Yeah, it is. And I don't know if you guys have had your press conference yet down there in Nashville. I'd probably assume not, because the Union typically do it on Thursday with Jim Curtin. And I don't know if you guys are going to bring up the word revenge or not. I know Jim Curtin was asked a couple weeks ago when we played in New York City, "Oh, is this a revenge game?" And he said, "Oh, no, I don't want to call this a revenge game." And he's like, what happened would happen with the COVID situation. It's just, we're going to go into New York City and try to do our best. And they wound up winning that game. So I don't know if the players feel in the Nashville locker room that this is a revenge game against the Union for the way that game ended, especially when, they went up early in that game and absolutely stunned the crowd with Hani Mukhtar scoring in front of the Sons of Ben, the supporters section. And I can admit, I was sitting down there we were just all shell shocked that we gave up the first goal. And luckily the Union were able to tie up the game, I believe, before the half. And then we all had a lot of back and forth, and eventually went to penalties. But we'll talk about that game in a little bit here and just what we can expect from this weekend's game. But yeah, like we've been saying, Nashville, they've been on the road all season long because they finally get their home opener. And you mentioned, if you were Gary Smith, you would be probably happy with 11 points on the road, 3-2-3 record, 8 goals scored, 9 goals against, which I'm sure, Gary Smith's maybe a little bit disappointed that they've given up 9 goals so far this season. But still, like you said, the best start ever in MLS history for a team getting 1.75 road points. I mean, it's been fantastic. And I guess the only other team that I've been very, very surprised with on the road is the New York Red Bulls, where I think they're like 4-0 on the road this season. So you guys in New York Red Bulls have been playing very well on the road. But no, I've just been impressed with Nashville going out to San Jose, going out to Utah, picking up points, because, that's a lot of travel going out west, because maybe some fans totally forgot that Nashville's playing the Western Conference this season. So they're going to be going to the West a lot more, going out to play LAFC this season. They go out to play Portland this season. I don't know if fans realize just how much travel that really is. And to see Nashville already pick up 11 points on the road, that's super impressive for me. But when you look at it, how would you assess the way that Nashville's dealt with playing in the Western Conference so far this season? I know 6 out of the 7 games have been against Western Conference teams.
Yeah, I would say the Western Conference opponents that Nashville has gone up against, namely FC Dallas, I think it's agreed from all parties, media like myself, independent media, Nashville SC, players, coaches, broadcasters. It was clear that game was the worst game so far for Nashville. They had absolutely no threat going forward against Dallas about a month and a half ago. So I think the 2 goals that they gave up in that game, the first was questionable, the PK. But when you have a guy like an Argentinian, Alan Velasco, a young DP, the quality he had, I think that second goal just was the epitome. He takes it pretty much a whole half field. He takes it half field and dribbles down, beats 5 Nashville players for the goal in his debut, coming off the bench. So that game, I think, is a bit of an outlier. But if you take a look at games against San Jose, where if it wasn't for Jeremy Ibobise, I think that Nashville takes 3 points, because just like Alan Velasco, Hani Mukhtar basically took, and unmarked, uncontested, by the way, took it half the field and scored. And that should have been the decider then. And so Hani Mukhtar gets a couple of goals that should have been 2-0 against the Quakes. If you take a look at the Real Salt Lake game, just silly defending. And it's been a set piece issue that, started obviously Philly fans and when Shavilko was able to score the goal. Same situation, right? And that they're just Nashville SC is giving up set piece goals. That game against RSL, that should have been a draw right there. So I definitely think if we take a look at what the teams that Nashville has played overall, the takeaway is Western Conference teams have been a lot more clinical. And I think Nashville was able to get away with maybe games at Orlando City or, games. If I'm thinking back to last season, even against Philly at the end of the regular season in October, I think, they were lucky then. And so examples like that, going into this season, I think that those teams being a lot more clinical on set pieces, being a lot more clinical when in transition, scoring those goals to put Nashville in that uncomfortable position. So I think that's the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, for sure. It's good stuff right there. So, as my listeners know, I always go over keys of the game, and you actually hit on one of my points there. The Union have to defend set pieces as well, and I want to see them take advantage of actually scoring a set piece this year. They've had a ton of opportunities this season to score off of set pieces, and they've yet to put one in the back of the net, but more on that a little bit later. But let's go on before we talk about that game. The offseason came for Nashville, and they traded Alistair Johnston, and they acquired Teal, Bunbury, and Sean Davis. Look, it's two MLS veterans. It's a player that both of those players, not just one, two players that have a lot of experience in MLS. And, Union fans have said in the past, that's the one area where they wish Ernst Tanner, the sporting director, would hit a little bit more than going and signing international guys. Not saying people are complaining about that, but, I think it doesn't hurt to have MLS veterans on your team, and seeing what Sean Davis did the last couple of years with New York Red Bulls, constantly being up there in terms of pressing numbers, winning the ball back in the midfielder. I mean, that was a huge pickup for Nashville. Teal Bunbury, even though, he's probably not the starter that he once was, he still has a load of experience, can come off the bench, make a difference for Nashville if they're chasing a goal. He gives you a great presence up top. But you look at Alistair Johnston, last season he played primarily as a right back, right wing back. He could play as one of the three center backs. I know when the Union took on Montreal this season, in Montreal, Alistair Johnston played as one of the three center backs. So a very versatile player. And we've seen Alex Mule play as the right wing back this season for Nashville. So were you surprised last year that Johnston was traded away after a successful 2020 season and 2021 season as well? And just what have you made from the defense this season? I know you talked about it a little bit, giving up stupid goals against Real Salt Lake. They gave up that 1-0 goal to Velasco with FC Dallas. But were you surprised about Johnston getting traded?
So a couple of things on that. I'll start with the type of goals that Nashville SC has conceded. As you mentioned, what I said about the RSL goals. The first one was Teal Bunbury. So it's a center forward marking Bobby Wood, another center forward. And the issue with goals like that was the second corner. And it was the exact same play from RSL. Bobby Wood comes diving in from the top of the 18. He dives near post. Teal Bunbury, they're basically like in a mixed man zone hybrid, and he got beat on the second attempt. So, that's a struggle. Minnesota United, when I believe was it Ja'Cory Hayes? Don't quote me on who, the guy who actually scored the goal, but the reality is set piece, guy splits the man zone, defensive marking off the corner from Nashville, and scores and steals a point at home for Minnesota United. So it's not necessarily the defense that has been giving up these goals. So that's part one. Part two, in terms of Alistair, I was shocked in terms of the deal actually getting done and in real time. But when I did my reporting after the fact and getting a chance to talk with those close to Alistair, but also talk to sources inside the club, the reality was that there was a disagreement between, what Alistair's path in MLS and in the future would be. Alistair was someone who, believed and does believe that he has the potential to, reach the Premier League in the near future. As a Canadian international, someone who rose from a third-string right back in 2020 to becoming a starting right back for Nashville SC, who was tied for third one year in least goals conceded, and then was tied for first the following year. So you take a look at that. He was also top 3 in caps for Canada in 2021. So the stock was rising for Alistair. And so I think it was more, okay, how do we see this stock rising? Nashville wasn't as gung-ho on Alistair's beliefs. And so they clearly saw an opportunity. Credit to Mike Jacobs for, obviously getting $1 million in general allocation money for Alistair. He frees up a lot of space, not only to spend in MLS, but obviously to buy down some contracts, given the secondary transfer window that will open up this summer. So, look, I think Alex Muil is a great placeholder. He's a wing back, and I'm sure Philadelphia will remember him from those battles with the Red Bulls. That he is technically a defensive winger. He's scored a few goals for Nashville this season, but he's someone who has top 3 work rate and total distance covered, distance per match per 90 minutes in the league. And so he gives you the defensive work rate that a Gary Smith expects, but also gives that opportunity to be somewhat of an attacking threat, the way Nashville likes to play in a 3-4-3 shape with him as a wingback. So it's not a hole that will stay there. I'll just say this, that Nashville, according to what I've been told, is definitely looking for a top-tier third defender in the 3-4-3, or even more a wingback in the midfield 4. So I think that there should be eyes open this summer for what Nashville SC is going to do in the market.
Potential DP player?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's going to be a DP. I'd be shocked. That would be a new revelation for me if Nashville decides to spend a DP level money on a wingback. I think it would be new for MLS.
Would, for sure. That would not go over well for a lot of fan bases there. If you see a team buying a player as a DP for a wingback for an outside back. So you typically expect, a striker, which could be a huge possibility for Nashville this summer. Number 10, which you guys obviously don't need. So I think if you look at this team, that's probably the weakest part of the Nashville roster is the right side defensively. Maybe get in competition for Alex. So competition is always good. We know we have it here in Philadelphia. The last player I'll ask you about is Sean Davis. He was a huge signing, like I said. I mean, he was the captain of the New York Red Bulls. Like I said, led the league in pressures, led the league in tackles. I mean, this is a defensive workhorse. Were you surprised that he's caught up to Gary Smith's system so fast?
No, not at all, because there are a lot of similarities with how Red Bulls deploys its midfield and the expected work rate, but also almost like the two-way expectations. If you take a look at a guy like Sean Davis, he can be a destroyer. He can be a 6 that makes sure that he's protecting your center backs, but he's also somebody who can make sure that he's top of your midfield and top of your roster in successful passes forward. He's a guy who can connect with Hani in the midfield. So that embodies what Dax was and is. If for Red Bulls fans, remembering Dax in his Red Bull days, which is interesting because, obviously it's the system that keeps on giving, right? Because Dax is that player to this day. And with a guy like Sean Davis, you just get a younger guy with a lot more physical presence that does the same things. And I think when Dax was out for the 2-game suspension after he got the red card for pretty much stomping on Bodie Davis against RSL, he was out for the Columbus game, and he was out for the Kansas City game. And I don't think when you take a look at the midfield, when you're without Dax and you can plug in Sean Davis to go along with Anibal Godoy or to go along with Brian Anunga, who definitely gets overlooked because of how stacked the Nashville central midfield is, you don't really miss much. And so with a guy like Sean, learning the story of how Mike Jacobs and the scouting staff and the front office was able to recruit him, and having the GAM to basically afford a top free agent like Sean Davis, it gives Nashville not only versatility in 2022, but I think longevity after 2022 as well.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, it goes back to my point, right? Dax McCarthy, another MLS veteran. I mean, this is what Union fans want, there are good players in MLS that are lifelongers in MLS. So Union fans just want to see a couple more MLSers, fight for some minutes here in Philadelphia. But save those thoughts for a later podcast. But moving on, these two teams, Nashville and Philadelphia, they don't have a ton of history between each other. They've only played a total of 3 times, including last year's, like you mentioned, Eastern Conference semifinals. Each team has one win in the series, with both teams winning at home. Both of those games were 1-0 victories for each of the clubs. And I can remember the game down in Nashville, and there was opportunities where Nashville could have won 2-3, even 4-0. The Union got lucky at times, I feel like, in that game. The Union scraped by Nashville at home with a penalty from Shabilko. So, I think we're going to see a very, very tight-knit defensive game, because both of these teams, you know how they like to play. They neither one of these teams like to possess the ball. They like to hit you on the counterattack. Both teams are very well disciplined, very well organized, and it's always defense first for these teams. So with this being the home opener, and this is something I'm going to ask Jim Curtin on Thursday, is if he thinks Nashville's going to be more attacking because it's a home opener. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you think Nashville are going to be more attacking because of that fact?
No, I would say certainly it will affect the mental approach to the game. I mean, you can't ignore that. You can't ignore the emotional effect it will have on players. There's not going to need to be any extra motivation. I think that's the low hanging fruit here. But I think it would be foolish, and I think Gary Smith would say the exact same thing. It would be foolish to change tactics in the thick of the season against, if not the best, one of the best teams so far in MLS this year, and a team that is one of the best coached teams in MLS. And I'll mention what, I asked about the history between Nashville and Philly. Recently, I talked to Gary Smith, coach of Nashville, and Mike Jacobs, GM. And I asked both of them, the same question of, how fitting, given the way the games panned out recently against these two teams. You mentioned the 1-0 up in Philly at the end of last season, where I think Taylor Washington, my personal opinion, I think he was a little unfortunate to get that handball, to give Shabilko that PK. And then when you take a look at the July game in Nashville, I think it's the best 3-man weave I've ever seen between CJ Sapong, Randall Leal, and Hani Mukhtar to get that goal. The playoff game is certainly something that Nashville's thinking about. And I will say that Gary said that this is one of the best teams and one of the best coach teams in MLS. And so they're not going to sit there and try to be cute with how they're going to approach the game. What I will say, and this isn't me reporting, but I think certain players like a Sean Davis, I think are going to be pivotal. I think the way Julian Carranza has started off this year, Walker Zimmerman is going to be up for it, Dave Romney, but I think a key is going to be Jack Mayer, who was the first ever super draft pick from this side back in 2020. He was number 2 overall out of Indiana. He's become a legit starting center back in a 3 center back system. And Gary Smith said recently that he's literally grown from a boy to a man over the past year. And I think he's going to be key based off of how Philly, as you said, will try and counter and try and pressure Nashville in transition. So I think certain players like that are going to be key. But also on the Philly side, just the way I really appreciate the way like a Leon Flock has come into the league over the past few years. And it's going to be interesting to see how CJ will go up against his former team and the center backs that Philly and Jim Curtin will decide to start. So I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game, and I think there's going to be a lot of close chances, but not a lot of chances, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Well, if the Union aren't getting a lot of chances in this game, I don't know if they can go back-to-back weeks. The fans with living that down on social media. I mean, 4 shots at home against Montreal last week. Jim Curtin said after the game that was the most boring game for either one of those teams in the second half. I mean, no offense whatsoever from each of those teams. So hopefully we see a lot more scoring chances this week for the Union, but I would not bet on it if I was a betting man. But some keys that I would focus on if I was the Union, for Union fans to focus on are, one, find ways to break down Nashville down with the ball, because, you want to beat the Union, then you make them keep a hold of the ball. You make them hold on to the ball, keep possession, because that isn't how they're meant to play. We saw a little bit against Toronto when they were down in that game where, Toronto were able to sit back a little bit deeper, keeping Philly on the ball where they would go left or right, and they couldn't break down Toronto defensively. And then every now and then they try to play those long balls over the top to Sergio Santos and Corey Burke, but the center backs for Toronto did a good job just to knock those balls down, and the Union couldn't find a way to break down Toronto at all. And so, the Union really have to find a way this week, because I don't think Nashville are going to control this game possession-wise. I think they're going to tell the Union, hey, look, you guys hold on to the ball, and we'll try to hit you guys on the counterattack. So I'm looking for the Union to find, players that constantly running into space, because there was a little bit of an issue against Montreal where guys weren't in sync. Daniel Gazdag, Mikael Ua, you would see Ua run down the wrong hole, and Gazdag would put it down the right hole, and the communication was off there. So hopefully, that's something Jim Curtin said that they would work on this week in training, just the movement off the ball. So hopefully the Union can get that corrected for this game and look to become options for the players, because, like I said, I think the Union are really going to hold on to the ball a lot, because Nashville want to hit the Union on the counterattack. Number 2, limit Hani Mukhtar's touches in dangerous areas. Look, you're not going to stop Hani from touching the ball. I think that's obvious. But if the Union can force him in positions where he's not at his most dangerous, then I think that would be a win for the Union. I expect a lot of tracking from Jose Martinez, their 6, on Hani Mukhtar. I think we'll see a lot of switching from the 2 center backs, Jacob Glissnes and Jack Elliott, on Hani Mukhtar. And Hani Mukhtar is going to be a menace in the box. He's going to constantly run off of these 2 center backs' shoulders. He's going to try to find space and beat these guys to the ball like he did for the goal in Philly in the playoffs last season. So if it's going to be key for the Union to limit his touches in dangerous areas. And then 3, you mentioned it earlier how Nashville have conceded a couple goals this year on set pieces. I think this game is going to come down to who can defend set pieces the best. Nashville, they have 4 goals from set pieces this year, while they've conceded 6 goals, one of those being a penalty, which is tied for the second highest in MLS, while the Union have 4 goals on set pieces. 2 of those have come from penalty kicks, while they've conceded no goals on set pieces this year, while I hope I am not jinxing them for this weekend. But, this game is going to come down to who defends those set pieces the best. I know we're going to get an entertaining game this weekend, and hopefully the Union are able to come out on top.
Yeah, I'll end on this. I think that this game is going to be potentially be a lot of fouls. I look forward to the Hani Mukhtar Jose Martinez rematch, as Union fans will recall in the playoff game, especially at the end of the first half. I think that's definitely what started the Sons of Ben starting to basically boo every time Hani touched the ball in the second half. And, Jose and Hani had some words to exchange with one another going into the tunnel of that game. So I think this is definitely going to be something of a rivalry, which I will end on this saying that that's what Mike Jacobs said, that the history, not in terms of the amount of games, but the type of games that they were playing. The loss to Philly away from home at the end of the season had a big effect on Nashville essentially losing that playoff game or the playoff spot at home. That game could have very well been played in Nashville, the Eastern Conference Final, had Nashville not struggled to get that point from that game. But also the way that they lost in the actual playoff game, missing 4 PKs, that's something that is going to build up this matchup for sure. So looking forward to it. But Todd, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. And if people aren't following you on social media, where can they follow you and find your work?
Yeah, definitely. I push a lot of my stuff, and we'll be having a lot of Twitter threads to come, not just about the game itself in the stadium, but about the food at the stadium. I will do a little bit of teaser and give you guys an exclusive. There's a taste test coming, where they basically go to all 6 food vendors and get a bite of what Geodis Park will be selling on a game day basis. And I'll also be getting a chance to go to the supporter groups and take a look at maybe some hidden gems at Geodis Park. So Live Life Drake on Twitter and Drake Hills Soccer on Instagram. But you can also read all of our Nashville SC coverage at Tennessean.com/sports/Nashville SC.
And for sure, and like I said in the intro, you might find this guy every now and then on Twitter Spaces with Andrew Wiebe and the guys over at MLSsoccer.com. But Drake, thank you so much Thank you so much for your time today, and good luck this weekend. And best of luck with your coverage for this team. And hopefully we can get a matchup between these two teams in the MLS Cup playoffs again.
Yeah, for sure. I will say that Philly was definitely by far my favorite road trip last year. I was able to make it for the playoff game, and that was my favorite city to visit. So I'm looking forward to it. And even if it's not a playoff game, obviously it won't be this year unless it is MLS Cup. But I look forward to potentially a matchup, man, I don't know, maybe in the U.S. Open Cup. Who knows? Yeah,
there we go. I'll take it. Hey, but we got to get by Orlando first, which is going to be a tough task. But Drake, again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Point 3, where I was going over my keys to the game, where I was talking about the amount of goals the Union have off of set pieces. I looked at how many shots the Union have so far this season, and the Union have 90 shots on the season so far, with 42 of those shots coming off of set pieces. Jack Elliott is tied for third in MLS with shots off set pieces with 8, while Kai Wagner is tied for the most completed dead ball passes that led to a shot attempt with 15. He's tied with Emmanuel Reynoso of Minnesota United. But going to Jack Elliott, he should definitely have a goal off of a set piece this season. Came off of a corner kick. You guys will remember the free foot he had. He beat Michael Bradley. Should have put the ball on target. Should have came to a goal. The Union have created so many set piece opportunities ever since Frank Leich has taken over set piece duties since 2001. And I think that's a topic, a future episode where, maybe I should look into the amount of goals the Union have scored since Frank's taken over the job. Look at years past with Union on set pieces. I think that would be a very interesting topic to discuss, to give you guys just to, give you something to think about. Because as we know, the Union are always looking at different ways to innovate, because they brought on Liverpool's throwing coach to work on throw-ins. They bring in Frank Leist, like I just mentioned. And the Union have to find ways to be ahead of the curve. If they're not going to spend with your LA Galaxies, LAFCs, Atlanta United, well, how can they find little details to make themselves that much better? And, hiring a set-piece coach, hiring somebody to work on throw-ins with you. These are all ways that are just going to up your game and make you that much better. And, this brings up a good question. Because I'll make a poll on Twitter where I'll ask you guys, do you consider a penalty kick a set piece? Because if you don't, then the Union only have 40 shots off set pieces. Like I mentioned, they have 42, because I can see why people say, oh no, a penalty kick isn't a set piece. But I can also see why people say, yeah, a penalty kick is a set piece. Because I've always thought that, a set piece happens in soccer when there's a stoppage of play due to a foul or the ball going out of bounds. Set pieces, in my opinion, range from throw-ins, corner kicks, goal kicks, to even penalties, and we all know free kicks. So, I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit of a gray area. I would love to see what people would say on social media. Do they think a penalty is a set piece? I do think it is. I really do think a penalty is a set piece, but, I can hear the argument for why people don't think a penalty kick's a set piece, because, I think when people think set pieces, they think of free kicks. I don't know. I would love to see what you guys think on Twitter. I think this would be a very good discussion point, because this is something that when I've looked over stats in the past, I've always asked myself, okay, are they counting a penalty kick as a set piece? Are they not counting a penalty kick as a set piece? It's, like I said, a gray line, which I think a lot of people would have different interpretations on that. So I'll put up a poll on Twitter, like I said, and I would love to see what you guys consider a penalty kick. And for all you guys that are interested where I get my stats, majority of my stats that I give you guys on the show come from Football Reference. I also get my stats from Foot Mob, from Sofa Soccer, from Who Scored. Occasionally I'll go through the MLS website, but yeah, I don't go to MLSsoccer.com a whole bunch to get stats. I just think, the websites that I mentioned are a lot more accurate. They give you a lot more advanced stats than MLSsoccer.com's stats. Soccerstats.com, it's like the webpage for that looks like really clunky, really old, but there's a lot of good information on there. And yeah, I know when you go to multiple different websites, some of those websites track the same stats, and they might have, for example, shots. They might say, oh, the Union have one more shot than the other website's giving, or another website saying that they have one less shot than another website. So I think, how people interpret stats, interpret data, I think it varies. But for the most part, there's websites that I just mentioned to you guys. They're very, very useful. They help paint a bigger picture than just what my eyes see on the field. So I don't know if you guys enjoy when I give stats. Some of you guys do. I'm sure some of you guys are like, okay, enough with it already. This is way over my head. But, if you guys have been listening to the podcast for a while, you guys know that I do enjoy stats. I do enjoy data. So there you have it. That's where I get all my stats, all my data. And only if one of those websites would sponsor the podcast. They are not paying me to plug them. But that is for all you guys out there that are curious. But like I mentioned, I'm sure we're going to get a great game this weekend at Nashville. For all you Union fans that are going down there, I hope you guys have a wonderful time in Nashville. Hopefully you guys can bring home some points. I'm sure all of us want 3 points, but I think coming home with 3 points is going to be a very difficult task. If we can come back with 1 point, I think that's great. I think Jim Curtin's going to have to make a tough decision with what kind of formation he wants to play. We saw the 2 wins we had against Nashville were both in the Christmas tree formation, the 4-3-2-1. Would Jim Curtin go back to the 4-3-2-1 against Nashville? Yeah, I don't know. I think if he did, that would very much so just confuse Nashville, because with them scouting us, they're used to watching us play the 4-4-2 diamond this season. Now, obviously, they have data on us playing the Christmas tree formation. Like I mentioned, we played it twice last year against them and got 2 wins. So I think this is a game where you've got to play your skillful players. You got to play your players that can play those splitting line passes, because they're going to, at times, have 5 men in their back line. What players can play those type of passes? What kind of players can dribble 1v1 versus players? Your Paxton Aronsons, your Quinn Sullivans, Jack McGlynn's really good at passing the ball. So I don't know. I think if I was Jim Curtin this weekend, I would go with the 4-3-2-1. Start your regular back 4. Start McGlynn in the midfield. Jose Martinez. I would start Quinn Sullivan. I would start Paxton and Daniel Gazdag. And then up top, I would start Julian Carranza. But I don't know. I don't think Jim's going to have Ali Bedoya on the bench. I don't think Jim's going to go to the Christmas tree formation this weekend. But if he does, I think that will be a bigger chance for the Union to get 3 points or even a point on the road, as opposed to playing the diamond. So I don't know. That's another, I guess, topic that you guys should discuss on social media, on Twitter, that I guess not only you guys should discuss it, maybe it's something I should discuss with you guys on Twitter. But this was a fantastic episode with Drake Hills. He plugged everywhere where you guys can find his work, where you can find him on social media. Like I mentioned, again, check out MLSsoccer.com's Twitter Spaces. A lot of great stuff in there from Andrew Wiebe, and they take a whole bunch of people from all over MLS, commentators, journalists, other podcasters. A lot of great stuff that the MLS team's doing weekly on Twitter Spaces. But if you guys aren't following the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, follow @FreeKickPod, wherever you get your podcast, The Free Kick. And yeah, let's just hope that the Union can get all 3 points. Let's hope that Sergio Santos is healthy. He's able to go. Hopefully, no other players are injured. As you guys are listening to this podcast, I'm sure Jim Curtin's press conference going to be going on by now. And, that's one more thing that I want to mention before I wrap this podcast up. So a lot of people I know have been asking about, the union, they don't stream the press conferences anymore. How can I find out what Jim Curtin's saying? How can I figure out, instead of just seeing what people type on social media? And I'm with you guys, I've been a big advocate for wanting them to bring back the live stream of the press conferences. But to the union's credit, after a couple hours after the press conferences, they do upload the press conferences as a whole on PhiladelphiaUnion.com. All you got to do is go to PhiladelphiaUnion.com/interviews, and all the press conferences are there with the players, with Jim Curtin. I know a lot of you guys, as soon as the press conferences are happening, you guys are reading the tweets and everything, but a lot of you guys, like I said, like to hear what Jim's saying. You like to hear his words. You like to hear what the players are saying. So that is one thing that I found out that the union do. They do post the interviews, just not live like so many fans want. So I'll leave a link in the show description for you guys that want to check out the interviews for yourself. But until then, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.